What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Pitchside with Parker. I've got a Arsenal season review video today, and now that it's been, a few weeks since Arsenal won the FA Cup, I've had some time for that to sink in, kind of weigh that with the rest of the season. I wanted to make this season review 2019-2020. So if you're new here, especially if you're an Arsenal fan, be sure to hit that subscribe button. There's a little icon right here. You can click that, or you can click the red subscribe button. Stay here. Come along for the ride. I promise there will be so much more Arsenal content and soccer content in general if you're just a big fan and want to support what I'm doing. So be sure to subscribe. Smash a like button on this video as well, and we can get into it.
Oh, yeah. I'm not the type of brother to play with. See a lot of people acting like all ball players sounding like haters. We the young kings of this generation,
So, as I said, obviously Arsenal won the FA Cup a few weeks ago. What a success, a great step under Mikel Arteta, and something that hopefully propels this team forward in the future. But that's the future. We are here today to talk about the past. Even with the FA Cup win, it was a rough season for Arsenal. Arsenal finished 8th in the table, its worst finish in 25 years. They had to suffer through 3 different managers, and outside of the FA Cup, really, there was nothing to be excited about. And again, we have this benefit of hindsight of thinking, ended up winning the cup and it went okay, but I want y'all to remember where Arsenal was coming into the 2019-20 season. People were pretty excited. I mean, yes, there was kind of the fall off at the end of the league campaign under Emery the season before, but this was a team that finished 5th in the Prem, made a Europa League final, and was on the cusp of Champions League football in both occasions, and then got better over the summer. They signed the likes of Pepe, a winger that Arsenal's been screaming out for a long time. Tierney, who's been an excellent signing for Arsenal. Saliba, and even though he obviously didn't play last year, again, just a sign of progression. And so people were really excited. And I remember at the very beginning of the season watching some of the preseason games and the opening few games of the season, and people really thought Arsenal was going to be a top 4 team. They didn't expect Chelsea to be so good this season. Maybe not Man U to be so good this season. And certainly not Leicester, Wolves, all those other teams that went ahead and finished above Arsenal. So remember what the expectations were. As Arsenal fans, we always have high expectations, but I think heading into this season, they were probably higher than they should have been, but that was part of what led to the amount of disappointment that we felt throughout the year. I want to bring y'all into my kind of personal story as a fan of this season as well, because really anybody could tell you how the season went for Arsenal. You could just read down the fixture list and it would be pretty understandable. But I felt a very deep connection to Arsenal this season. This was the first year I can ever say that I've actually watched every single game. Name a competition that Arsenal was in this season. I watched every game they played. I watched all the Europa League games, group games, League Cups, FA Cup, every single one. Literally from those preseason friendlies against Colorado Rapids, I watched every single game of the Arsenal season. It meant so much for me because Arsenal was actually something that really kept me going a lot of times this year. As I think back to the beginning of the season, last fall, kind of the end of last summer, I was going through some really tough times personally. I had a big falling out with my best friend, who was someone that I lived with at the time, and I was in a pretty dark place. I was a bit depressed. I was kind of just really keeping to myself. I would go to the things I had to go to. I was still in school, and, I had some responsibilities at school, and I had a job. But outside of that, I kind of just kept to myself, stayed in my room, and I filled my time by watching a lot of Arsenal games. I'm the type of person who I would watch AFTV, and I would listen to Arsenal podcasts and YouTube channels, and anything Arsenal that I could get my hands on, I was doing it because I kind of needed something to fill that time and that space in my life. So I really enjoy being a fan, but at the same time, I have to say that the way Arsenal was playing, man, it wasn't helping things out for me. I mean, it was a sad period of time for me. Like, I just remember thinking, like, oh, my day can't really get much worse. And then Arsenal would come on and Unai Emery would put out just a disaster show. And I would just be thinking, God, it can't get any worse than this. This is terrible. So the turnaround at the end of the season definitely meant a lot to me. It felt like a whole turning stone more than just at the club. It felt like a turning stone for me as well, just because of how much I feel tied into this team and how connected I was to it at a time in my life where I wasn't doing so well personally. And I know that's a story for a lot of people out there, and I think that's one of the beauties of sport, and I think that's one of the beauties of soccer as well. So that was just a little bit of insight to from my personal journey with the team this season. I do want to say, if you want to hear more about sort of me as an Arsenal fan, I went on a podcast a few months ago now. Go check out the Layoff podcast. I did it with Henry and Isaac Bushnell and Noah Stack. And Henry and Isaac do this podcast. And Henry is a reporter for the U.S. national team. He writes for Yahoo Sports. Check that out because I talked a lot more about my history as an Arsenal fan and my experience as an Arsenal fan. And as I said, this year was the first year I ever watched every single game of the season. And I've definitely gotten more into it, I would say, over the past 4 to 5 years. But I have been a fan longer than that, and I go into that in the podcast if you're curious. But yeah, so with all of that being said, the point I'm trying to make here is that as good as it ended, this was a terrible season for Arsenal, man. This was the worst season in 25 years for Arsenal. So I thought it was only right that if I'm going to do a season in review video, I would do it in this format, which is 5 times that Arsenal broke my heart this season. And there was certainly a lot to choose from, but I picked 5 that really stood out. This is my top 5 moments that Arsenal broke my heart this season. The 2019-2020 season review. First, I'm going to give a quick honorable mention to the 5-5 loss in the League Cup to Liverpool. This was one of the most exciting games of the season. It featured some outrageous goals, one from Joe Willock that was in contention for goal of the season for Arsenal, and then a few bangers from Liverpool as well, one from Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, unfortunately, and some great goals at the end from Divock Origi. I put this one in there, though, because as exciting as the game as it was, and I think it was Arsenal's most exciting game this season, they threw away a 3-1 lead, a 4-2 lead, and a 5-4 lead in stoppage time to end up going to penalties and then losing on penalties. That one was a little bit of a heartbreaker, but I'm going to keep it as an honorable mention because at least it was an exciting game. These other games, yeah, they hit a little harder than that one did. So I'm going to count backwards from 5 to 1, and number 5 on my list is the home loss 2-1 to Chelsea on December 29th. Now, this game, to give you some context, this was the first game they played against Chelsea this season. It was at the Emirates, and it was Mikel Arteta's first home game. So Arteta had only been in the job for about a week or so. In his first match, he drew 1-1 with Bournemouth. It was an all right result, but people were still kind of questioning and waiting for a more positive step under Mikel Arteta, because at the time, Arsenal was 12th in the table, and Chelsea was still in the top 4. So this was a game that was going to prove to be a big challenge, but Arsenal came out firing. They scored in the 13th minute on an Aubameyang header, and things were looking good. The Emirates was rocking. We're thinking, okay, maybe first win under Arteta could be coming. And then the big controversy in this game surrounded Jorginho. A lot of you will remember that, but what you might not remember is that Jorginho actually had to be subbed onto the game as an injury replacement in the first half, so he wasn't even supposed to be playing in this game. He ended up getting subbed on. Then he gets a yellow card at the beginning of the second half. And then towards the end of the second half, around the 75th minute or so, he had a play where he pulled back Matteo Guendouzi. He doesn't get a yellow card, and Jorginho stays on the pitch. What happens in the 81st minute? Jorginho finds himself open on a set piece, and he taps it in. Shouldn't have even been on the field. But Chelsea had equalized, and then Tammy Abraham, just 4 minutes later after the Jorginho goal, spins Mustafi and bangs in the 2-1 winner. And I remember sitting there at my grandparents' house watching the game. Yeah, kind of ruined my whole day. And it was actually my little cousin's birthday. And I remember just being really sad, thinking that I had to put on a happy face and go to her birthday party after that. But that was a really sad loss. I think just especially because of the circumstances and because it was against Chelsea, it was disheartening, and it really embodied the Arsenal mentality that happened a lot this season of kind of 1 step forward and then 2 steps back, and we had to wait to get the first win under Mikel Arteta. All right, so number 4. This game happened back in October, nearly a year ago now. Sometimes it's crazy how long this season ended up lasting. But it was October 27th. Arsenal plays Crystal Palace at home. Now, at the time, this was at the beginning of the season, and Arsenal was actually in 5th place. You remember Arsenal had decent form to start the season, and believe it or not, Crystal Palace was in 6th place. So this was actually like a top 6 matchup at the time. Within the first 10 minutes, Arsenal scored on 2 corner kicks, one from Socrates, one from David Luiz, and all of a sudden the starting center backs were on the board. 2-0 up against Crystal Palace. You're thinking, this should be a cruise. This should be no problem. Lock up the 3 points. Much needed for Arsenal. But, as we all know, it's never quite that simple, is it? So, towards the end of the first half, Wilf Zaha wins a penalty for Crystal Palace, and then it was 2-1 heading into halftime. Jordan Ayew scores right after half to equalize at 2-2 for Crystal Palace, and we know how the Emirates is. The tide just turns so quick. Even if Arsenal is having a great performance, something like this happens and they lose hold of a lead, and it gets ugly inside the Emirates, and that's exactly what happened. Xhaka, who was the captain on the day, gets subbed off by Unai Emery. And at the time, Xhaka was one of the most maligned players for Arsenal. It's really interesting to look back on this game because, Xhaka really had a huge turnaround this season. And by the end of the year, he was one of our most important players. But at the time, he was a greatly hated Arsenal player. Certain fans who actually cheered when his number went up on the subs board and they found out he was the one going off. And Xhaka definitely did not help his case as he came off the field. He kind of baited the crowd. He did the little, pump up his hands. He even cupped his ear. He also told the fans to F off. Nothing befitting of a captain. He threw off the captain's armband. He threw off his jersey and he just walked straight into the locker room. I literally remember, I think the day after this happened, I had an assignment due for one of my sports reporting classes in college, and I wrote a 1-minute audio segment on him and why it was such terrible behavior and why he should never be captain of Arsenal again. So, people were outraged at the time. But basically what happened the rest of the game, Socrates had a goal disallowed by kind of a ghost foul on Callum Chambers. It was a very strange call. Arsenal should have actually won the game. It ended as a draw, and then it ended with just all this turbulence of what was going to happen to Xhaka, criticism of Unai Emery for his substitution pattern and for the fact that Xhaka was even captain in the first place, and then who was going to become the new captain. It was just a mess. But I think the reason I call this a heartbreaking game this season was that it showed the peak toxicity of Arsenal. It's something that we kind of all know about this club, and it rears its head at the worst of moments. And that was definitely one of the moments where I felt a little bit ashamed to be an Arsenal fan, if that makes sense. That's a pretty heartbreaking feeling, I have to say. So, number 4 was the Crystal Palace draw. All right, number 3, the 2-1 defeat to Tottenham in the North London derby. Now, I won't go into this game too much because I actually made a video on this game. There should be a link up here somewhere. I did a player ratings after this game and talked a lot about the game. This one makes it into my list at number 3 because it was really disappointing from an Arsenal perspective to lose this way in the North London derby. And you could say that there wasn't a whole lot to play for in this game. I mean, Arsenal had already pretty much lost its chances of playing in Europe. Without any fans, obviously the derby loses a bit of its edge, but it's still a North London derby. This is still the biggest game of the season. Come on. Arsenal just didn't show a lot of fight in that game. There was an outrageous goal from Lacazette early in the game. Again, a contender maybe for goal of the season. And this is a pattern you're going to see in some of these heartbreaking defeats, is that there were a lot of good goals that were canceled out by just stupidity from Arsenal. Lacazette scores a banger from outside the box, top bins, beat Lloris. And I was thinking, okay. Super excited, celebrating the goal. And I didn't even have time to fire a tweet off or fire a text off or anything before Kolasinac passes the ball straight into the path of Heung-min Son. And Tottenham equalizes in that game. And then the rest of the game kind of petered out. Tottenham scored again. 2-1 defeat. And Arsenal just didn't really show a lot for the rest of the match. They had more of the ball and but Arsenal just didn't play very well. They didn't show a lot of fight. And this game makes it into heartbreaking defeats for me because not only was it Tottenham, it was Tottenham under Mourinho. And it was Tottenham under Mourinho to go on and actually finish above Arsenal in the league. I mean, if that doesn't rub you the wrong way as an Arsenal fan, you might need to reevaluate some of your priorities as an Arsenal fan. So this one was certainly a heartbreaking defeat, and it slots in at number 3 for me this season. And coming in at number 2, the 2-1 defeat away to Brighton, the second game in Project Restart. Now, I also made a video after this game, so I'll put the link to that one as well, and I'll try not to talk about the game too much. But basically, this was the second game after Project Restart for Arsenal. The first one was a 3-0 defeat to Manchester City, and this was the one that, when you put those two games together, they really threw us back in at the deep end of being an Arsenal fan. We were thinking, all right, restart, new start to the season. Yeah, there's only a few games left, but maybe we can show something over the last few games. And beyond that, Arsenal actually still had a chance to get into the top 6, but they did need all 3 points from this game. Because it was so short after Project Restart, they did have a chance to kind of climb back up towards those European spots, but it was a point where Arsenal needed to start winning pretty much every game they had left. And what I think most people remember first about this game was the Bernd Leno injury. He was hurt on a pretty dirty play, I think, in my opinion, by Neil Maupay, who was the striker for Brighton. He nudged into Leno while he was coming to claim the ball. Leno falls wrong and twists up his knee. The first heartbreaking part of this game to me, and I mentioned this in the video, so you should go watch that, is that I was really disappointed that none of the Arsenal players really had Leno's back. I mean, everybody could see that it was a dirty play. And Leno, even as he was getting carted off the field, was like pointing at Maupay. And nobody was really backing up the guy who had literally been their saving grace so many times this season. And that was really disappointing for me to watch as a fan. And then the rest of the game got even worse. Once again, like the Lacazette goal in the North London derby, Pepe actually opened the scoring in this game. And if you remember, he hit a curler that was just a beauty. Another top bins finish. It was, again, in line for one of the goals of the season. About 10 minutes later, Arsenal give up another goal, a scrappy one on a corner. And then it came down to stoppage time. And who else but the guy who injured Bernd Leno, Neil Maupay, comes up with a winner on literally what was the last kick of the game. And this was so frustrating because despite the fact that it was a really good goal, and you have to give credit to Brighton for that, they had one more chance to score. They knew that they could only bring it up the field one more time because they were over the 94 minutes of added time, and Arsenal still switched off, and Maupay scored. And then, of course, there was all the beef after the game with Guendouzi and Maupay. And this one was heartbreaking to me, not only because of literally just the last dying breath of the game being a goal for Brighton, but because this one really showed me where Arsenal was at. We still had hopes of Europe coming into the game. We had hopes of a better restart. Those were vanquished very quickly. And beyond that, this was the one that really made Arsenal feel like a mid-table team this season. I've said it a few times, but if you look at Arsenal realistically, they're a mid-table team right now. They just are. They're not quite top 6 quality. And this was one of the games that showed it because it ended the season with 0 out of 6 points against Brighton. First time that had ever happened in the Premier League. Maupay got the best of Arsenal. And after the game, he said, you guys need to show some humility and some class and really look at yourselves in the mirror and look at where you're at. And he's right. Arsenal lost to Brighton twice this season, and they were a mid-table team. And that is a crucial part of this season review, unfortunately. Now then, number 1 most heartbreaking defeat of the season. Oh boy, you all knew where this was going. Olympiacos at home, February 27th, 2020. Oh man. I remember this game like it was yesterday. I was with my roommate Tyler. We had classes Tuesday, Thursday. Of course, it was a Thursday night game, Europa League. It was a 2 o'clock kickoff where we were in Chicago. We left our class early because I wanted to go home and be there in time for kickoff. Because again, this is Arsenal in the Europa League. Yes, there's been some failures. Yes, it's not the greatest competition, but look, Arsenal had made the final back-to-back years. I mean, this was still something we could get excited about and a hope for Champions League football because at that point, Arsenal was so low in the table that this was the only chance. Here's the context you have to remember coming into that game. This was a good time as an Arsenal fan. They were on a 10-game unbeaten streak under Arteta. Ever since that Chelsea loss that was, number 5 in this list, Arsenal had gone on a 10-game unbeaten run. Arteta seemed like he was figuring some things out, and within that 10-game run, there was the first leg win over Olympiacos, which was a really impressive win in Greece. Arsenal was the only team all season to get a shutout against Olympiacos at their ground. And so we were all coming into the game thinking, all right, this should be pretty good for Arsenal. Like, just keep it rolling and we'll advance to the round of 16. And, oh man, I guess we're going to have to relive that game. So basically, Pape Cisse, he was a backup center back, only played 19 games this season for Olympiacos, only I think 8 goals in his senior career, scores against Arsenal. Somehow they leave the man who is 6'6", unmarked on a corner kick, and he gets a free header. So, of course, he went on and scored that. That evened the tie at 1-1. Arsenal missed a lot of chances in regulation. Eventually, it went to overtime. Overtime is surely what you'll all remember. Aubameyang, once again, a goal of the season candidate that did not stand up to get the victory. Aubameyang scores an overhead kick, belts it in, 113th minute, screaming, yelling straight to the camera. Arteta celebrating. All the players are celebrating. Surely Arsenal have won. Home at the Emirates, up 2-1 in overtime. Aubameyang overhead kick, golazo, just wonderful moment. And as tough as it had been, you know, that's how it goes sometimes in a cup. Whatever, get the win, lock up shop, and we'll be on to the next round. But once again, as we know, Arsenal just don't do that. 118th minute, just 2 minutes left until the game was over. This all starts when Bernd Leno gets the ball back and sends it out of play for a corner when he could have just kicked the ball up the field. I'm still mad at Leno to this day for that, and as great of a season as he had, he is the reason we got knocked out of the Europa League. Don't get it twisted. And Arsenal had struggled defending corners the whole game. So why he would give a corner kick away there, I don't know. Yeah, anyway. Eventually, off the corner, they played it a couple times around. And then it comes back out. They cross it. El Arabi scores. And, oh, it's just a nightmare. It's just a nightmare for Arsenal. I mean, I went back and looked at the highlights in preparation for this video. And I kid you not, the tears welled back up in my eyes again. I mean, there were definitely some tears shed as it was happening live. I was so disappointed. I remember being there in the living room. I was watching with my roommates, Ross and Vishal. I bet y'all are probably watching this video. And, oh, man, it just tore your heart out as an Arsenal fan. Heartbreaking, to say the least. But the game was not over yet. They were celebrating as if they had won, and for the most part, I didn't really think there was any chance left for Arsenal until the 123rd minute. 3 minutes deep into overtime stoppage time, and the ball falls to who else? Aubameyang inside the 6-yard box. No defenders in front of him, just him and the goalie. And he misses the frame. Oh, he misses the frame. Just tragic. You didn't think Arsenal was going to get another chance. You thought that Aubameyang, his goal was going to be forgotten. And, oh, I still don't know how he missed that shot. I really don't. Oh, man. Just the sinking feeling after that. You knew the game was over for sure this time. And Arsenal loses and gets knocked out of the Europa League on away goals. You know, we have a saying as fans. It goes, as an Arsenal fan, it's the hope that kills you. And, yeah, I think in this Olympiacos game, that was about as good as I could have put it, because it was the hope of that Aubameyang goal, despite the fact that we know Arsenal choke leads away. We know that Arsenal have this terrible reputation. We thought surely you couldn't lose it after that. And yet, as soon as you let your guard down, that's what happens. So that was definitely the number one most heartbreaking defeat of the season. I think it really, in a lot of ways, summed up the season for Arsenal fans. You know, two of the best players all season were the two that made key mistakes to lose Arsenal the game. Leno giving away the corner, and then Aubameyang missing the sitter at the end. And of course, still some great moments like the overhead kick, but in all, just a disappointing season. That was a disappointing game. And honestly, to this day, that still ranks probably in the top 2 for me for most heartbreaking sports defeats I've ever seen with my favorite teams. I'd say that's the worst Arsenal game, the only one that compares to it. If you like basketball, if you're a college basketball fan, I'm a big Tar Heels fan, North Carolina. The loss in the 2016 championship game on the buzzer beater to Villanova was very similarly painful, where I was just kind of sitting there afterwards, just dead. That one was very similar because Marcus Page hit a shot that was so crazy, very similar to the Aubameyang overhead kick that just ended up getting forgotten because of the buzzer beater. And kind of that's what happened in the Arsenal Olympiacos game as well. But definitely the most heartbreaking game I've ever seen as an Arsenal fan. And I'd have to say number one most heartbreaking game this season. So, yes, there was a lot of sad times. There was a lot of heartbreak this year as an Arsenal fan. But, of course, in the end, Arsenal wins the FA Cup. And, yeah, I mean, hopefully next season Arsenal can provide a little more of those cup wins and a little bit less of the heartbreaking defeats. But hey, if you're an Arsenal fan here and you're watching the video, don't get your expectations too high, okay? We know this is what Arsenal do. It's a heartbreaking team, and I'm sure that it will continue to do just the same. So, anyway, thank you all for watching the video. Really appreciate everybody that's been here to support, and if you're new, be sure to subscribe, drop this video a like, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.